finishes. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Meta Cafe. Grab your cup of coffee, your tea, your water, and sit back and let's talk a little bit about some astrology. And let's see, good morning, everybody out there. I can see a few of you already. And you might notice I'm not sitting alone this morning. I have Rebecca Eigen with me. She is a Houston astrologer who's written a book called The Shadow Dance and the Astrological 7th House, which, as you know, we've been talking about off and on for the last couple of weeks, is about relationships and partnerships. And so we are going to be talking about that in just a few minutes. But there's something else that distinguishes Rebecca apart from everyone else that we've talked about, in that you know how in the mornings we sit back and we are often talking about the shadow. When we're working with the gene keys, we're always looking at it through the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi, the highest expression of it and the lowest expression of those frequencies through those gene keys. And good morning, Roseanne, and good morning, Suzanne. It's good to see you girls out there. Rebecca looked at the shadow side of the 7th house. It was an interesting conversation that she and I had I think it was Rebecca, we were just actually talking in, email or maybe text messaging when she picked out one of my own shadows because she's studied these so much. So I'm really pleased to have her with me this morning. Rebecca, welcome. And I just want to give you an opportunity, since I couldn't seem to print anything this morning, to tell us about you, how you came to write the book, and anything else you want us to know about you.
Okay, well, my background is that I started studying astrology in 1985 with Kim McSherry here in Houston. I graduated from the Houston Institute of Astrology, and it was like a 5 to 8 year program where I took classes from her for 5 years. I also, in 1988, ordered my psychological horoscope analysis report by Liz Green, and I had only been studying astrology 3 years. And I read that report, and it was like I underlined the whole thing. I mean, the entire thing was underlined with several different colors of pens because it was so accurate. But in there, she talked about the shadow, and I didn't identify with that at all because I didn't know what it was. So I put that in the closet, and I forgot about that report. Well, 2 years later, a friend of mine introduced me to some tapes by a Jungian analyst in training who was also an Episcopalian priest. And I started listening to these cassettes, and this man was really making me think. And he was talking about, he was using terminology, Jungian terminology, that I knew nothing about. So I decided one day, I think I want to go with you to this church and put a face on these tapes that I was listening to. So I went with her to the Sunday school class, and then I went with her to the mass, and I sat there staring at this man, and I couldn't stand him. And I wanted to get out of there. I felt, you know how you just feel your arms crawl and you're just, I want to get out of here. And she felt it. She actually felt it. And she said, "Do you want to leave?" And I said, "Yes." And so I went home that day. And here's a really great way the shadow will show up for you, is that you will obsess about it. So I obsessed about this man, and I kept thinking about him and thinking about him all afternoon. And I had been going to a metaphysical Christian church where my whole life was about positive thinking. And so I thought maybe I should go give him a positive thinking tape or something to uplift this person, because I saw him as cynical and depressed. And the interesting thing was, around 4 o'clock that afternoon, I remembered he said the word shadow. So I go to the closet and I pull out my psychological horoscope analysis report by Liz Green. And she says in there that in my shadow, that I am a depressed and cynical person in order to compensate my overly optimistic view of life, because I'm so much air and fire. And I was stunned. I mean, I was stunned. I read that and I looked at it and I read it again and I started crying. I literally started crying, and tears just started running down my face because things just started coming up from the unconscious. It was like all of a sudden, all the dark feelings and all of the things I had denied and all of the things I repressed because they weren't positive. And a friend of mine told me she hated me back then because I was always in such a good mood. So
Wait, your friend said that to you? The same friend that just introduced you to this guy?
No, another friend.
A whole nother friend. Okay.
Another friend just said she hated me because I was just so happy all the time. And I was always looking on the bright side of everything. My moon is at 26 degrees Sag. And so I'm very, well, what can I learn from this? So I just jump into that mode like right away. And at any rate, I called the church, the Christ Church downtown, and I asked for him. And I found out that he was teaching at the C.G. Young Center in Houston. I had never been there. So he was going to teach a 12-week course in analytical psychology. And I decided, you know what? I need to go learn from this man instead of fix him. And I signed up for his course. And as a consequence, I found out that I wasn't imagining things, that he was depressed. It was a passing time part of his life, that something he was going through. He was cynical, and he was leaving the church, and he was becoming a full-fledged Jungian analyst. And he was in training at the time, but he was going through his analytical degree. So I signed up to take his course, and I have studied with him now 25 years. I never get tired of hearing him. He is brilliant, and he is not only a priest and very spiritual person, but he is also a Jungian analyst who has taught me about this part of us, the shadow, that we don't want to know about. You know, we'd rather somebody else do it. Let somebody else be like that. I'm not like that. What? And what I needed was balance. What I needed was that Libra function of balance, to where cynicism was just an extreme of not being realistic. And depression was the hidden side of me that I was not identifying with. I couldn't see it. So people were coming into my life in a repetitive fashion. It was remarkable how people would come into my life and they were cynical and depressed, and I couldn't stand them. I didn't want to be around them. I mean, didn't they know if they could just think positive that everything would work out for them? That was my guiding philosophy at the time.
Lovely, lovely. Oh, goodness. Well, for those of you who are just joining us this morning, good morning to all of you. I see new faces out there, and that means they must be tuning in because there was something they were interested in about your work. Maybe you know them, Cindy Mitchell and Jessica Hughes. I've seen you out there in the morning, so welcome to all of you. I'm sitting here this morning with Rebecca Eigen, and we are talking about the book that she's written called The Shadow Dance, the seventh house, this astrological seventh house. I think I just said that backwards. Either way you look at it, we're talking about the shadow. Now, Rebecca, show us the book. There we go. Awesome. I love the dancers on the front. They're playing music and looking like they're having a good time. And it belies the idea that there's this shadow that we're talking about, the hidden parts of ourselves. So give us a little bit of an idea of where we can find our shadows. We know how you found out what your shadow was, but for the most part, what is it that really is the tell about our shadows for us?
Well, when you identify with your persona or your mask or your rising sign, I mean, your first house cusp is what you identify with. You know, I have Leo rising, and so the exact 180 degrees opposite in anybody's chart is your seventh house, and it's what you least identify with. So I bridged the two, the Jungian psychology and astrology, and wrote this workbook. And it is a workbook. You have to do the work. Whatever's on this, whatever sign and whatever planets reside in your seventh house, you're not going to identify with. You're actually seeing that in another person before you can identify it within yourself. Naturally, yeah. You know, when I was 35 and 45, that was very common. At 65, of course, I understand I have Aquarius on the 7th and that I'm very Uranian. But at that time, I would only attract Uranians in a repetitive fashion, or people with Moon in Aquarius, or people with Venus in Aquarius, or strongly Uranian components. And so whatever is in your specific 7th house is going to give you a technicolor picture of what you have to learn about yourself.
I don't like that idea.
You know, on my website, I have positive and negative keywords for every single sign, because the truth is we are all everything. And, we all actually have a little bit of all of it anyway. But whatever's on your 7th is very hard to identify with. What's on your 7th?
Right. Capricorn.
Oh, well, Capricorn, a very strong component of Capricorn or Saturn in the 7th or Saturn in aspect to Venus is the capacity.
How about I have Saturn in Capricorn in my 7th house?
Good. Well, I mean, that can be challenging, and it can also be rewarding because you can find somebody through your work. You can find somebody to work with. A big component of Saturn in the 7th is to learn to trust, because the capacity to trust is impaired. And so I feel like we are that from the moment of birth. The whole chart speaks to our whole life, right? It speaks to our birth, it speaks to our present, and it speaks to our future. So whatever's on your 7th is what you're destined to share in an equal way with another person. And, if one person's doing one extreme and another person's doing another extreme, then it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah. Here's what I found really interesting. Sometimes these weird thoughts pop into my head when I'm in the shower, right? So I'm in the shower this morning and I'm thinking about the shadows and, how sometimes people say things like, oh, she married her father or he married his mother, that kind of thing. So I was thinking about that for God knows whatever reason. And I was looking at my own parents. I had foster parents and I had my real parents. And I realized that my 7th house is split between Capricorn and Aquarius. My mother was a Capricorn. My father was an Aquarian.
Well, the second.
And I was like, wow. And I have Saturn and Jupiter both in a conjunction out of sign conjunction. Saturn in Capricorn and Jupiter in Aquarius.
Wow. And they're in your 7th. Both of them are in your 7th.
They're in my 7th house. Yet yeah. I barely knew these people.
Well, we regardless, what's inside is outside, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. It's energy. So we are only going to be attracted to our own energy. We can walk into a room and there's 5,000 people. We're not attracted to anybody. Why? The reason is we're looking for ourselves out there. And until we can find that part in ourselves and integrate it or be at peace with it and do it in a balanced and harmonious way. Saturn in the 7th, obviously, Saturn is the father principle in the psyche of everybody. Yeah. And so when you have it in the 7th, you are destined to become your own parent and to share that in a healthy way in a relationship. You have to be in a relationship where you're not being the child, where you are, sharing responsibilities and sharing problem solving and all the things that have to do with Saturn. And then emotionally, it can appear as if the other person is cold. They're distant, they're cold. I have Saturn in Libra, so it's very similar. And it looks like you keep attracting people who are hard on you, or they're withholding, or, they're rigid, and you cannot see that in yourself. But if you follow yourself around with a little tape recorder, or you write in a journal, if you write in a journal, you're going to, one of the things about doing shadow work is that you have to be honest with yourself, and it's not easy. Robert Johnson, who wrote the book, Owning Your Own Shadow, he's a Jungian who wrote We, Understanding the Psychology of Romantic Love, He, She, and Owning Your Own Shadow. He says, what does it take to own your own shadow? It takes courage, and more courage, because you have to have the courage to go inside yourself and see these parts of you. And then you have more choices to make, right? Then you have more choices in your own self-expression and your own behavior. But if you're projecting it, they have to carry the burden for you. They have to overdo it almost. It's like we're almost giving the universe permission to bring these people to us who are overdoing it so that we can see, okay, I need to learn something from this person and meet them halfway. Halfway.
Just halfway. So one of the ways we might be able to recognize our shadows then is in the repeating patterns. I hear people all the time saying, every guy I meet is blah, blah, blah. or is, there's repeating patterns in their lives. I get into a relationship, everything goes fine, and as soon as we move in together or we get committed, then it all blows apart. So is that a way to find the shadow too?
Yes, and in fact, the only way to do a healthy marriage is to do shadow work together. That's why I wrote the book, because if the couple can understand each of their relationship dynamics and they can sit there and talk about it. This is a 7th house, is an air house. We have to talk openly about what's going on with us, with the other person, and communicate what we're experiencing so that the other person is aware. All of this is about contrast. We learn about ourselves through the contrast and then through recognizing that we need to do some of this. We don't need to do it to the extreme. They're doing it. For you, for instance, you need to be more responsible. You need to take the initiative to set boundaries and to have goals and to, do all the Saturnian things, and then the Jupiter as well. Jupiter comes into there, so when you have more than one planet, you're doing both. And you're doing both signs, which are archetypes, right? They're the archetypes that we're made out of. But you have to share them with another person in an equal way. And then the other way to see shadow qualities is extremes. When you're one extreme and they're another extreme. I mean, there you have it. It's like you've got a technicolor picture of what you're needing to learn. Now, if it's extremely negative, for instance, Mars. A lot of people have trouble with Mars. I wrote about 6 pages in my book about Mars because
I noticed that.
when you have Mars there, you have to learn how to be angry in the moment. You need to be able to express your anger in a healthy way. Otherwise, it becomes rage. And you can pull that out of the other person. I have people come to me with Mars in the 7th. They've married 3 violent people in a row. What is the universe asking of them? Learn to stand up for yourself. Not like, I'm a really nice new age person and I'm just not going to do that. No. We need to say, no, that doesn't work for me. With a voice that says you mean it. And the other person will back off. It's when we put up with it and put up with it and put up with it. Oh, well, he didn't mean it like that. Oh, well, they didn't mean that. I don't like to have confrontations. Well, guess what? It just repeats. And then I've had couples who actually work that Mars energy together. They take that Martian energy. They go out and work in the world through Homes for Habitat, swinging a hammer. It's physical. They go take dancing together. It's like move the muscles together, get out there together and do this Mars energy together instead of it living against you. And that's what Jung said. Whatever one does not live, lives against one. Makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So some people in the chat are sharing some of their ascendants. Suzanne says her ascendant is 2 degrees Gemini. So that puts Sagittarius on her 7th house. Mm-hmm. And Roseanne has an Aquarius ascendant, which puts Leo on her. Now, that would make her completely opposite of you.
Yes. Yeah, my son has Aquarius on the ascendant. So Leo puts the sun ruling the 7th. And so you want to be a star. You want somebody who is dynamic, who's bold, who's out there, and who is making a name for themselves. And that's part of yourself that you're attracted to. And people with the sun in the 7th is the same as having the Libra sign. You want to do things together and you want harmony and you want peace. So you have to learn how to balance that sun sign dynamic together. You're not here to be alone when you have the sun ruling the 7th or Libra as a sun sign. So it's like a super important thing to learn how to come into balance with that person. And also to express your own creativity. The sun is your self-expression, right? It's your own creativity that you're drawn to, like a magnet in the other person. They're bigger than life. And Gemini rising, Sag, you want somebody who's wise, who's inspirational. who's, like you with Jupiter and Aquarius. You want somebody he's bringing in new information. Aquarius, you're wanting somebody who is philosophical, very learned. They're always learning. They're a lot of times they're brilliant, and you're very drawn to somebody who is another example of Jupiter is in a negative fashion is they're overdoing things. They overdo, they overextend, they overspend, they can inflate. And so the inflation is when somebody is out there, is out of balance with themselves, even, that isn't bringing in that Saturnian checks and balances. So, but it's, at the same time, having Jupiter there, or Sagittarius there, communication is essential with Jupiter and Gemini is truth and facts. The facts and the truth are always being thrown back and forth between these two people, because the Gemini can be more identified with, well, these are the facts and this is how it is. And then the Jupiter person is, yes, but what does it mean? Let's bring in the meaning of this. So each sign has
let's look deeper.
Yeah, let's look deeper. There's a complementary opposite in all of them, just like Aries and Libra are complementary opposites. The 7th and the 1st are complementary opposites. Too much of either one of them doesn't work.
Gotcha. Let's see some other comments coming in here. Natasha, shadows, I'll just put it up here, then you can see it. Shadows are a great way to have movement in the self, especially when we are vulnerable and see we are not perfect.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And Roseanne's validating what you said. Yep. Stephanie says, what about a Leo? And Leo. So Stephanie, Leo on the rise.
Leo and Leo together is awesome.
Yeah.
Often because they're each other's best cheerleader, and can put up with a little bit of that, I'm so great, and it makes you laugh when the other person says it because you're so great too, and you just tease each other. And my boyfriend has a Leo sun and Sun Uranus, so there's the Aquarius component, right? And yeah, and I have Leo rising, so whenever he is like telling everybody how great he is, I just kind of smile and say, yeah, he is. So it's being each other's best cheerleader, and the drama of the king and queen kind of thing doesn't totally turn you off. When somebody isn't aware of that part of themselves, they can look at that person and go, oh my God, they're just like so full of themselves, right? And yeah. some of that was Sag too.
So I loved what Suzanne shared. She says, and she's the one that has the Sagittarius on the 7th, Gemini on the rise. She says, I need someone who makes love to my mind and for real. No sex, someone spiritual. So, I mean, spoken like a true Sagittarius on the 7th house.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
And the other thing that you said. The
question is, Suzanne, did you get that person?
Well, you have to become that person in order to attract that person. I mean, I really believe that it's when we are not doing both sides is when we get the opposite. And opposites attract, obviously, that's where we've all heard that. But what about like attracts like? When I heard, these two statements are paradoxical, but when you understand the 1st and 7th houses, then you understand that what's inside in the unconscious is going to be out there. That this is a Jungian thing, is that whatever we identify with very strongly, the exact opposite is building up in our unconscious to the same degree. The exact opposite. Think about that. When I first heard that, it was like, okay, I had to think about these Jungian things. And the first part of my book is, how do you recognize your shadow? What are the different ways to see your shadow? The second part of my book is our parents, our partners, and our 7th house, because we all marry our parents. And not only those with Saturn and Jupiter in the 7th, but if you think about the chart, it's a cross.
Correct.
Mother and father, self and other. So we are all on this cross. And each angle has to be integrated. And that's why we fall in love with our parents. We will fall in love with our parents unconsciously. The unconscious actually who chooses who we fall in love with. So if you get this feeling where you're, oh my God, I'm in love, or I'm just, it's too high or it's too low, you're either shadow hugging or shadow boxing.
Shadow boxing. That's an interesting phrase, right? So I want to go back to that cross, because something just clicked with me in that, because I always think I married a Libran man. We've been married for 36 years. He's Libra on the rise, Aries on the 7th house. And I remember, gosh, before we got married, I said to him, if you think that we're going to have some regular old, idea of marriage, then you're wrong. And I want you to know that now. I'm an independent person and I just like to do what I like to do. And he just looked at me and he went, yeah, I know that. And I went, okay, good. We got it. And I didn't realize that I was speaking probably to his 7th house.
Sure. Exactly.
Makes perfect sense now, because that was, a weird thing. And he's got a lot of Libra planets. I tend to draw Libras. I have a son that's a Libra. I have friends that are Libras, blah, blah, blah. It's everywhere in my chart. So does that mean then, if I'm attracting a lot of that energy, that there's something about that I need to look into as my shadow?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I think everybody can sort of see that in their lives, they tend to attract certain signs or certain types of people.
When I was working with, I'm a graphic artist as well. I do a website design and logos and that sort of thing. And I was working with Exxon Chemical for 6 years, and almost all of the people, like 5 people in the Marcom division, were all Sagittarius. So it's like energy. It's like you bring to yourself parts of yourself, and we continually do that. We will continue to do that. It doesn't end, because it's energy.
Yep. It's just so fascinating, because you're talking specifically about the 1st and 7th, but we have other shadows, right? Besides that, just in the 1st and 7th house. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Where else can we find, shadows? I mean, maybe take someone who's having trouble in a career or with people that they work with, because I guess it all really does come back down to relationships, doesn't it?
It still comes to your 7th house. But when I do a consultation, I look at Venus. I look at the aspect Venus is making. I look at the ruler of Venus, what house it falls in. Everybody is so specific. It's like it's not one size fits all, because it isn't. Each person is completely unique. There's so many different components to what can fall in shadow. But that's why I wrote the book the way I did. Instead of writing it, the first part of it is not about astrology. It's Jungian psychology.
Yes, exactly.
So you literally have to go into your own unconscious to look at what is in the shadow by looking at extremes, by looking at people that you can't stand. We've all had the experience. You walk into a room, you don't like somebody. They may have just said one thing, and all of a sudden you've decided they're like that, I don't like them. And you walk away and they give you the creeps. What is it about that person? Write it down. I once had this happen to me when I was in my 20s. I walked into an office and I was a graphic artist. I was sitting, my drafting table was here, and I'm doing my artwork, and this girl is like, she just annoyed me. Like everything she did annoyed me. And as life would have it, they moved her drafting table right next to mine.
Like in your face, right? In your face. You got to deal with this.
I had to get to know her. She became one of my best friends. Guess what she was? Aquarius. Right on my 7th house cusp. My business partner was an Aquarius. And I didn't, I had just started studying young. I started studying young in 1990 and astrology in 85. So Trish was my best client at Exxon. And when Saturn reached her midheaven at exactly on the degree, she lost her job and got fired, to the degree that Saturn got to her midheaven. So she came to work with me, and she was like, And I'm like, awesome, because we work so well together. She had great creative ideas, etc. Well, as soon as we came to work together, within 6 months, she was exactly like my ex-husband. But I was the common denominator. So go look in your relationships, go into your memory banks, look at the people that you've rejected, that you've X'd out of your life. You know, it's so easy to love everyone, isn't it? But how about loving individuals? How about loving people that are difficult to love and looking at why you walked away from that relationship? And here's where you get to do the work. You know, you get to do the work. And it comes back down to our parents. What inside we decided, I'm not going to be like that. Guess what? You are like that. You just don't know it. There's so many different ways to find your shadow. And so that's the first chapter in my book. And then there at the end of the first chapter, there are questions. It's a workbook. You have to answer the questions. And all along the sides, I have a place for you to write notes. Because as you're going through the book, stuff comes in, just like you were in the shower this morning. Stuff will come in through the unconscious and you write it down. Write those notes down because you might forget. Later, you come back. You know, one of my students said, what's written in the book stays in the book.
Good plan. And you put it in your closet so your spouse or significant other can't find it.
I put a place for notes on every page so you can write notes to yourself and ask yourself these questions so that you can do your shadow work. And once you do your shadow work and your partner is also doing their shadow work, the harmony is real. The balance is real because it's conscious. You've each become aware of opposites within yourself. It's those opposites within ourselves that we know nothing about. We all know our flaws, right? I mean, I have Moon, Mars conjunction in Sag, so I'm rude sometimes. But I know it. That's not shadow. The things that we identify with that we know, oh, well, I don't like that about me. That's me. Well, guess what? That's not shadow. That's not your shadow. No. Shadow is qualities about ourselves that we know nothing about. And that's why when we see it in another person, we see a certain behavior in another person, we're repulsed. There's a repulsive quality to it.
Yeah. Or what's interesting about it, have you ever heard of human design astrology?
Mm-hmm.
So in human design, there are the two columns of numbers. So for those, let's see if I can share this without giving away too much information about this person.
I've never had it done on me. I've always been interested. But
well, there we go. You see, we have these, hold on, I'm trying to cover up this person's name and stuff. There are these two columns of numbers, right? And one side is based on your birth date, which is your personality. These are the soul purposes. These are the things, the traits that you really readily recognize in yourself. But the other side is your life purpose. And these are the things that you discover as you move through your life to be true about yourself, including those shadow pieces. But what I think is interesting about it is that they are the traits that other people will readily recognize in you.
Yes.
That you may not recognize yourself. So that kind of says to me that, that you can even look to what other people might say to you about you as a place to find the shadow.
That's in my book as well. When more than one person, when two or more people say something to you about yourself and you resent it, might be a good idea to look at that, because people see all of us. They see, our friends love us. They see things about us that we don't see. And a good friend will point it out to you if it's hurting you, and others will just accept you. We can't go around changing everybody or pointing out everything that's wrong with everybody, or nobody would have any friends, right?
Correct.
But if we're in a close, intimate relationship, or a child and a parent or a coworker that we have to work with day in and day out, you're going to see everything. You're going to see everything about that person, but they can help you to see more about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
They can
Mm-hmm.
help you to see more about yourself, to see where you're lopsided, where you could benefit. Now think about this. How could I benefit more from that sign or that planet in my seventh that's giving me trouble? How can I benefit more from that? That's the gold. I mean, that
Yeah.
is the gold of this work.
Something that just came into my mind, and I remember, I think you did address this in the book. Um, there, in Jungian psychology, they look at archetypes,
Right?
and and the shadow. So I was also thinking about Carolyn Mace. I think was the first person that I ever read a book that actually spoke to archetypes. Is there something different between archetypes and shadows?
Archetype and shadow. The shadow is an archetype.
The shadow is an archetype. Okay.
Archetype is something that is in consciousness of everyone. It's like a cookie cutter of the mind. So Mars, the planet Mars, is an archetype. I have a 2-page spread called Correspondences, Archetypes, the Zodiac. And each one is, just starting with Aries. Think about this as an archetype. An archetype has higher and lower orders of states of consciousness within everyone, but it can also be an object. So Aries, Mars, a dojang, fire, war, chili pepper, all of these are correspondences. So they're considered to correspond to each other. That's what an archetype is. It is a cookie cutter pattern that all of these things, these different things correspond to each other. That is what an archetype is. So everybody is all of them. We are all the archetypes. And astrology is.
We have all 12 of those archetypes right there in our charts.
We do. And as astrologers are being interested in astrology and learning more about ourselves, we can see where we have more of this, less of that, or imbalances in the elements. That's another thing where you can see shadow, is when you have a lot of air and you don't have any water, or you don't have any earth, or you have a lot of earth, etc. When you don't have that opposite element, and in Jungian terminology, this is thinking, sensation, intuition, and feeling, right? So in astrology, it's earth, air, fire, and water. And we know when we have too much of anything that we have to develop. We literally have to develop the opposite quality or the opposite element. And that's where, understanding Jung is fabulous. It bridges, to me, Jung and astrology just go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Fascinating stuff.
And then when you discover something about yourself you don't like, let's talk about that. So, okay, you see something in another person and you don't like it. You don't want to be anything like that. And you say to yourself, I'm not like that. Why would I even want to be like that? Have y'all ever said that to yourself?
Actually, I just had this reaction the other day because I was reading a book, and an astrology book, and somewhere along the line it said something about Taurus and being lazy. And I was looking in my chart, realizing, okay, Venus is in Taurus in my 10th house. Am I lazy when it comes to work? And I was freaking out. Literally, Rebecca, I was having a moment as I settled with that thing. And that was such a very powerful reaction that I was having to it, that I had to really sit and look at that now. It was like staring at the shadow. And of course, my mind is going, no, you're not lazy. You're up every morning. You're doing this and you're busy all day. So what does that mean to me? So I haven't gotten that yet, but I get exactly what you're talking about now.
All right. How about looking at it from a different angle? And this is what I do when I'm working with somebody. And somebody says, okay, I can't stand this person. They're lazy. How about looking at that person like they know how to relax? They know how to slow down. They know how to get comfortable and be at ease, and you are too hyper. How about if you need to do some of that so you can be in balance. If I take anything, anybody, and I do the opposite with it, and that will help you to see where you could incorporate some of that. What's interesting is when you're in a relationship and the two people are polarized, one person's doing one extreme, the other person's doing the other. If you will make if you can become aware of those opposites and make a conscious effort to move towards the middle of that, it is remarkable how the other person will do the same. It's unconscious. Yeah. So much of our being is unconscious. Jung says 90%. 90% of our being is unconscious. That's a lot. You know, I can see it from the time I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and now at 60s. I can't wait to see what I'll see at 80. You keep retracting more and more and more. And it's almost as if the universe is going to rub our face in it until we see it, if we need to see it. We need to see it.
Right. Got to look at the shadow. Some of the comments that we're seeing here, Suzanne says she loves that. Look deeper. And then she says, man, I don't like many people.
Well,
would that mean that maybe she needed to look into how she feels about herself?
Yeah. I mean, some of these things are hard. If you don't like very many people and you're seeing that everybody out there has a problem, then you have to do some work. There's some work to be done. What do you not like? Do the pen and paper work. What are some of those things that you don't like? Because often if there's things that we don't like in another person, it's something where we are lopsided, where we're lopsided. Take that into account.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't like
maybe Suzanne and Roseanne, who says the same thing, me too. Give us an example, you two ladies, of something.
I'm not going to be Pollyanna and say that we have to like everyone. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
We can't be in a relationship with everyone. You know, we can't. Some of us are very introverted and some of us are extroverted. So if you're an introverted type of person, then you need a lot of alone time. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's when you hate or can't stand. That's shadow. You know, when you have preferences, I don't want to be doing this or that or being with that person. That's a preference. But if you hate that person and you want to get, do them in, and I'll use a collective thing to show shadow. Take the controversial subject about abortion. If your preference is to not have an abortion, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to go burn the building where they're having abortions and kill the people inside or the doctors, that is your shadow. I mean, think about that. I'm trying to think of the minister who was outrageously against sex, and Jimmy Swaggart. I mean, think about this guy. And then he was like totally against sex. He didn't want you to dance, be naked or go to the beach or, this or that. He was so body conscious and had a very challenging Venus in his chart. Well, guess what? He gets caught, with the prostitute. And then he blames it on the devil. That was his shadow that was acting out behind his back. If you think about your physical shadow, it's behind your back, right? You can't see it, but you're doing it.
It's behind you.
You're still doing it. So the shadow is more about extremes. The shadow is not about preferences. We all have preferences. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that helps. Roseanne says, yikes, perfect example. She doesn't hate people. Suzanne just says, yes, I need alone time. And I wouldn't take the fact that you need alone time as meaning that you don't like people. I mean, I think that's probably not it's not quite the right correlation.
It's more about introversion and extroversion. Introverted people get recharged. They do. They get recharged by being alone. by reading, by being in nature alone. Extroverted people charged by being with others and talking. You know, extroverted people need other people to get their batteries charged. And we're born that way. If we have a lot of water and earth in our chart, if we have a lot of it, then we're going to be more introverted. I think that can show how we can be more introverted. If we have a lot of air and fire, we're much more social. We're more out there.
Yeah, I ran across a chart the other day where in her chart and, you know, one or two other little things going on. I was like, wow, that was the first time I'd ever seen something that in my face, drastic, you know, where there was a definite need to bring in some other energies. So it happens out there to people, you know, the focus for that person then needs to be on bringing in some of the more emotional things, water energy or grounding energies and things like that. Yes, so just for people who might be tuning in right now, we're talking with Rebecca Eigen, and she is an astrologer out of Houston, Texas, who's written a book called The Shadow Dance, the Astrological 7th House. And where can people work? It's a workbook, right? It is definitely a workbook. I guess because I got a digital copy of it, I did notice the lines on the side. But of course you can't really write on a digital copy. I guess I could have actually, but I will if you buy the book itself, it's a workbook.
I will mail you one.
You're sweet. So where can people buy the book?
You can buy the book on Amazon.com, and it's also in Kindle. The first book had a lot of color in it. Because I'm a graphic designer, I put like 25 plates of color in it, and I printed 1,000 copies and they're gone. I have 2 left. So I took the color out. And it's just black and white now, and it's available on Amazon. And you can buy it, and you can buy the ebook on my website, shadowdance.com. You can buy the Kindle on Amazon as well, and it's in color.
Hold on, I'm going to actually put that www.shadowdance.com, correct?
Yes.
There you go. That is Rebecca's website. You can buy the book there. What else are you doing, Rebecca? What do you do? Classes or online webinars? Do you do? I mean, obviously, my listeners are all around the country. You're in Houston. I'm up in Washington State. Do you do things online like what we're doing today?
I need to learn how to do what you're doing. I haven't taken the time to learn how to do what you're doing, and I want to, because I would love to do a shadow workshop online with people like you have in your audience. I would not be able to go in depth with more than 12 people at one time. So doing an online, that's a physical workshop here in Houston, or flying to other cities. I'm happy to fly to another city and do a workshop if somebody wants to sponsor that. Doing the work with people one-on-one can get really deep and very painful, and also very helpful. And, there's both, what you go through. But doing an online workshop just to give an introduction to what the book is about. But the book is a workshop. The reason I even wrote this book is because my son said, "Mom, when are you going to write a book?" He would bring friends over. He would bring friends over that were in their 20s, and he'd say, "My friend has a repeating pattern in his relationships. Mom, would you please come out here and talk to him?"
I love it.
That was so cool. So I finally wrote it down. I had been teaching workshops for years, and I took the information from the workshops and transcribed verbatim what's in the book. And I also, at the very back of the book is 4 actual consultations with me, 4 real consultations, word for word. So somebody can read through those consultations and see what they can expect to get. It's when I'm working one-on-one in a consultation, that person gets specific and very detailed information, because it's private. It's private. It's like going to a therapist. You don't blab all of that online,
Oh, absolutely. And people can get that information, how to get a reading from your website, Shadow Dance, right?
Correct. And there
Let
are
me put that back up here.
lots of articles I've written on the shadow on my website. There are some YouTubes of other classes that I've taught or spoken live in public that you can also watch that are for free, and just go to learn more about your shadow.
Nice, nice. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here with us this morning and talking to us about this, because I really feel like the shadow is the key for us to live a peaceful, happy life and to change the world that we're living in. We have a lot of shadows, each of us, that we have to deal with within ourselves, but the outer world, of course, is always reflecting that back at us. And I really see that as key. I would be happy to tell you about the things that I do webinar wise and how to do that. So if you need some advice, I will be happy to share that with you, because I think that would be a really good thing for you to be able to do. Last comments here, people saying, do it. Roseanne says, oh, fun. Suzanne mentioning she's super empathic. So when she goes out in public, people frustrate her. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Our empaths out there are being barraged at times by so much stuff. And let's see, Roseanne says, yes, healing friends of my daughter make me so happy. Our kids are great for bringing us things, right? They're great.
Another real quickly, another really interesting thing is when you have like a couple that are having problems. And what I found is that when I do couples, I will interview and have a session with consultation with one person in the couple, and then the other person, and then I put them together, because otherwise they're not vulnerable. They can't tell the truth in front of each other, and it's very disconcerting to have, to be exposed. You're being exposed. And so then I put the couple together, and then I write a 10-page report for them based on what I heard them each say, so that they can work towards the middle with each other, or look at the places where they have to learn to accept their differences and adapt, right? Because we can't change other people. Yeah. One of the best things about astrology, if you go we are who we are.
Thinking you can do that. Yeah, you've got problems if you think you can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing work that you're doing. And you also said you were a graphic artist, right?
I am. I'm a graphic designer. My website is Esprit, webgraphicdesigner.com. And so that's what I have been doing since I was 18, and 5 planets in Libra in the 3rd house. It was my destiny. I started doing it right.
Creative of you.
I started doing it right out of high school.
So if any of you out there need a logo or need some website design, you can go to her website there as well.
Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. It's been great having you here. If people want to find you, they will do that. Definitely. Brian, are you out there? Is Wyatt awake? I have a treat for all of you guys who listen to me and who know about my grandson, Wyatt. He's here at my house. I get to share him with you all. And my son, Brian, but he doesn't want to be shared.
Not too much.
Look who I have here. Right? This is Wyatt. He's a Pisces. And I don't remember what his rising sign is. But Wyatt is very wise. Look at him. He just is fascinated by that screen. So I will leave all of you today with the ability to reach out to Rebecca if you would like to have a reading with her about your relationships or about your shadow, or get the book and work through some of the issues that you have yourself. And a little bit of baby love here. We love you so much. Mwah. Thank you for joining us this morning. And Rebecca, I will be with you. And just as soon as we stop, I want to talk to you for just a minute. Everybody have a great day. Thanks so much. See you tomorrow.